Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up, I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes. This day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These
On December 18th, Nixon unleashed round-the-clock airstrikes that flattened targets around Hanoi and Haiphong. It would be remembered as the Christmas bombing.
It was frightening, but we were still cheering. I mean, we were cheering because something was happening.
Những người hàng xóm của tôi có 6 người bị chết. Họ đang còn mang bầu một cái đứa con nhỏ trong bụng.
Around the world, anti-war demonstrators returned to the streets. The Prime Minister of Sweden compared the United States to Nazi Germany. The Pope called the bombing, which killed more than 1,600 civilians, the object of daily grief. James Reston of the New York Times pronounced the raids war by tantrum.
Well, hello everyone. How are you doing? And there we go. Yeah, today has been a very busy day. If you have been watching my stream earlier, I've been basically streaming now. This is what's probably my 4th hour because we did a mega marathon of the Cult of RONR so that Mike and I could catch up. So this won't be terribly long unless there's a bunch of comments because you know I'll stay as long as people want to chat. I'm a sucker for that. So, as I have up on the screen, if you enjoy this content, I do very humbly ask for your support on Patreon. It really does mean a great deal to me, and it does mean I get to produce more content. It's only going to be so long that I can work 50 to 60 hours a week, volunteer as much as I do for the LP, and then be recording these things so late at night. So if you can, please consider it at patreon.com, Pink Flame of Liberty. But you can also hit like and subscribe, and that helps me out a lot as well. And I see Dave is asking me in chat, what is RONR? That is Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. We kind of have a bit of fun of that and do daily devotions in RONR. So if you're interested in learning parliamentary procedure, we do make it kind of fun. Let's, though, start to get right into the content here. Now, I've got something a little extra here. The past few episodes of these, we've been talking about Robert Lefebvre, who I know I'm mispronouncing his name. I suck at name pronunciations. And while I was working in storage this weekend and going through records, and I, in fact, actually had this in my private collection that I had purchased on eBay, but I didn't even notice this. But here is when Robert Lefebvre had passed away at the age of 74. This newsletter actually is really interesting. This was put out by an activist who I still speak with, though he's not very keen on the LP any longer. But what was great about this is it was a frank look. Like, LP News is wonderful, don't get me wrong, but it's produced by the party about the party. This is produced by someone who's free to be critical and to give all the juicy gossip. Like, he spilled the tea in modern parlance, you know? So, yeah, this is a very good little magazine. I wish they had still put things like this out. But let's just take a little look at what it says about Lefebvre here. It's a long article, so I am not going to read it. But it talks about how he was America's foremost advocate of libertarian pacifism, which really interests me because if you don't know, I am a pacifist myself, but it is not for political or philosophical reasons in that sense, though it's for religious reasons, and that, I suppose, can be considered philosophical, but not for the same reason as his. And he, though, rejected the label of anarchy, preferring the term autarky, meaning total self-control and self-government. He was also very vehemently opposed to political action. And so he called himself a non-activist. See, I don't think you need to be in politics to be an activist. What he did was activism. You know, he was an educator. That's activism. And he died from a fatal emphysema attack after returning from the wedding of Carl Watner and Julie Pfeiffer. And Watner is the founder of the voluntarist movement, that's Wendy McElroy nowadays. And something I did not know here is Lefebvre was immortalized in the great Robert Heinlein libertarian science fiction novel The Moon is a Harsh Mistress as the thinly disguised model for philosopher Bernardo de la Paz. I'm going to have to read that again to see Lefebvre. in there. So I'm going to see if there's anything else in here that would be, of of interest to you. It says Lefebvre's pacifism and his opposition to political action aroused controversy in libertarian circles, particularly after the formation of the Libertarian Party. Now, it continues on another page. I know there's another quote that I want to read here, but let's see here. During the late 30s, he became enamored with a religious cult movement. I wonder what cult that was. So continued on page 2, because there's a quote from Rothbard here that I wanted to read, because Rothbard, let me tell you, he didn't pull no punches. He was always a bit cantankerous, wasn't he? I have a feeling, even though I admired his work, that he and I probably wouldn't have gotten along. We're both too bullheaded. But here is what Murray Rothbard said. He didn't pull no punches. Like me, I won't speak ill of the dead, but not that he spoke ill, but you'll see. So Murray said, he became very successful at converting high school kids, housewives, and businessmen. I admired Lefebvre for his willingness to be consistent, but also one has to admit that the whole doctrine of anarcho-pacifism is crackpot and a disaster. Certainly he was the only truly consistent anarcho-pacifist, perhaps of all time. At the last analysis, he was a true original. Now, there was one other thing I wanted to find in here, and this is where he and I would depart, Lefebvre, even though I am also a pacifist. He argued that all force, including defensive force, was immoral. And I do agree with Murray Rothbard. Unless everyone in the world was following that, it would be a crackpot and a disaster. I do not hold in total, like for everybody, that all force, including defensive force, is immoral. My particular position is that it is for Christians. But I don't impose that on everyone, and I don't judge Christians who disagree with me. So my pacifism isn't because I think it is per se immoral. I think that lethal self-defense is something that Christians voluntarily give up, not because it is immoral. There's nothing immoral about defending yourself, but there's also nothing required about it either. So I just want to read you some other headlines in here. And in the future, perhaps we'll go through other magazines, but I have my hands full with LP News right now. But check this out. LP Polygamist Takeover. I wish. Not that I'm a polygamist or anything like that. I just think we kind of dropped the ball on marriage equality after gay marriage. And here, if you don't know who Norma Jean is, she was an adult entertainer and was one of our candidates in California. So it's interesting that she's in here. And then there's just some, look at this, I like this. Plot thickens in 1988 LP race. Like, you know, the T is in here, you know? The T is in here. So, in any event, I'll let Mike Holmes, and that is the gentleman who put this out, who writes me every once in a while, ask him, what the hell's going on with the LP? What are you doing? Blah, 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 blah. Let him know that I'm still enjoying his newsletters, and I wish he still put them out. Look, you'd think I would know how to fold, huh? Okay. But now let's get on to the main act. But since I had been talking about Lefebvre, I wanted to let you guys know. So I hope that was interesting. Let's go to the LP News. And why isn't that showing? That's weird. Huh. I have something that's supposed to be showing up there. It's not like it's a big deal or anything, but it's just funny. Oh, I know why it's not. See, I learn something each time. I got to put it up top. There we go. I just wanted my little logo. All right. So now it is a dual month. So this is going to be multiple episodes. It's a lot to do all this in one. And it's November, December 1972. So we're catching up. What I mean by catching up is I want to be on the same month exactly 50 years ago as the month we're in. So I got to make it up to February and pretty soon March before we can do that. So let's go over this. Hosper's vote projected at 5,000 plus. It's funny that we were so thrilled about that. National headquarters is still in David Nolan's living room. Alrighty. With official final figures still unavailable due to the lethargic nature of government, election officials, and the low priority given to write-in votes, because there was a lot of write-in votes for us, we are unable to report with certainty the actual number of votes that will officially be reported as having been cast for the Hosper's Nathan ticket. All available evidence indicates that the final total will be in excess of 5,000. However, this means that the real total is probably in excess of 10,000, as write-in votes are not even tallied in many states. And that is true. And that's a shame. Oh, your vote counts, right? Not unless you do it in the government-approved manner. As expected, the LP ticket did the best in the 2 states where they were on the ballot. Go figure. In Washington, the State Election Commission has stated that the ticket pulled about 1,400 votes. All returns except absentee ballots are included in this figure. In Colorado, final and complete returns give the LP ticket 1,108 votes. In each of these 2 states, the vote works out to slightly better than 1 vote out of every 1,000 cast, which is not bad in view of the fact that LP membership in each state was less than 75 as of Election Day. That is pretty good. In California, there was a write-in effort. Returns are only available from Los Angeles County, where the LP ticket drew over 300 votes. California LP leaders are confident that the statewide total will be near or above their goal of 1,000 votes. Starting from a 3-state total in the area of 3,500 votes, we can add 50 from Utah, 150 from Texas, and 95 from 3 precincts in Alaska. Alaska's total will no doubt be higher. Reports from other states where an organized write-in effort was conducted are not yet available. It seems reasonable to assume that at least another 1,200 votes were cast in the other 44 states, thus bringing the nationwide total to at least 5,000. Actually, this is a conservative estimate. The reported total may be in excess of 7,000 and might even be 10,000, although we doubt it. We hope to get final complete figures from the Congressional Quarterly, which tallies these figures by early next spring. The raw figures are not as of much interest as some of the data that can be gleaned from them, however. So it's, interesting on how we have grown. But remember, this is barely a party a year old in an age where there was no internet, just starting in somebody's living room. And for those of you, because I can see my control panel, that are watching across the various outlets, between the multiple Facebook places this is streaming and YouTube, please don't be shy. And if there's comments, please do comment. That is what makes it much more enjoyable. So continuing. First, and perhaps of most immediate interest, is the fact that the LP did better in terms of votes than several other better-known and more experienced minority parties. Now, that is really interesting. In the 2 states where all significant minority parties were on the ballot, which is Washington and Colorado. In Washington, there were a total of 8 parties on the ballot. The 2 major parties, us, the American Party, the Communist Party, and then there was a different People's Party back then, the Socialist Labor Party, and the Socialist Workers' Party. I wonder what the difference between the socialists are there. In Colorado, the Prohibition Party, which is still around. Can you believe that? My God. I don't think I've ever met anyone from the Prohibition Party. That would be fun. I'd like to infiltrate them. Pretend to be a prohibitionist. Was also on the ballot, bringing the total to 9. In Washington, we ran third of the 6 smaller parties, behind the American and People's Parties, but ahead of the Communists and the 2 Socialist Parties. Woo, woo. In Colorado, we ran 4th out of 7, behind the American People's and Socialist Labor Parties, but ahead of the Socialist Worker Party, Communist Party, and Prohibition Party. This indicates that given an opportunity to reach the voters, we can do at least as well as other minority parties. In other words, we are a viable minority party and indeed have been recognized as such by virtually every political analyst who has commented on minority party activity this year. This data also indicates that if we can get on the ballot, we can draw about 20 votes for every party member we have in a given state. Thus, if we can increase our membership to 32,000 by 1976, a conservative estimate, see article elsewhere in this issue, and can get the election laws revised to eliminate discrimination against minority parties, dream on, we can pull 640,000 votes in 1976, which could easily make us the most significant minority party in America in terms of numbers. We're already the most significant in terms of ideas. Little cocky there, David. I agree with you, though. A good goal, it seems to your editor, is a cool 1,000,000 votes in 1976. Another way of looking at the data from the 72 election is to see how our candidates for state and local office performed. In Colorado, we were able to get 2 LP candidates on the ballot. Pip Boyles, who was the first platform committee chair and the LP treasurer at the time for Congress, and Hugh Futch for state legislature. Both Pip and Hugh pulled about 1.5% of the vote. Unfortunately, that's sometimes what some of our candidates get now, though I would say the default now is more about 4%. I ran a line holder campaign and I got just under 5%. In their respective races, 2,000 votes out of 150,000 and 240 out of 16,000 respectively, even though both ran with practically no money and very few campaign workers. Hugh had about $120 and 6 workers, and Pip had about 1,020 workers. These figures indicate that even with limited resources, we can draw 1.5% of the vote, which would work out to 1.2 million votes nationwide in an election where 80 million votes are cast. And we should have about as many members in each congressional district on the average throughout the nation in 1976 as we had in Pip's district this year. A third statistic of interest. In the states where Hospers and Nathan were on the ballot, our cost per vote received was about 50 cents. I wonder what our cost per vote now is. I need to find that out. As compared to about $1 per vote for Nixon, McGovern, and Schmitz. And minority parties usually get less votes per dollar spent than the major parties. This 50% per vote figure also held true for Pip and Hugh. All these figures indicate that if we can get members' money and ballot listing, the LP has a great future in store. Whether this future potential is realized is up to you. I'm sorry, I didn't switch the page for you guys. Okay, I'm skipping over to that second column there where it says in other races. Elsewhere, libertarians did not fare as well. In Massachusetts, Avi Nelson failed by a narrow margin to capture the GOP nomination for Congress in the 3rd District. This is no doubt partly due to the fact that, in contrast to Idaho, and Idaho is important for another reason that we will go to in a minute, Massachusetts is probably the most liberal, i.e. collectivist state in the country. Nelson, however, tried to downplay his libertarianism. Boo, hiss. Running as a 100% Nixon man, and it didn't help, and he lost anyway, which perhaps serves him right for abandoning his principles. I love you, David. In New York, Guy Riggs was unable to get in the ballot in his attempt to run for state assembly. He assures us that he'll be back, however. Also in New York, Gary Greenberg and Walter Block were ruled off the ballot, even though they both had far more than the necessary number of signatures. Apparently, the Democratic incumbent in Gary's congressional district was getting scared. According to the New York LP, he and his cronies spent over $10,000 to get Gary and Walter disqualified. That shit started from the beginning, and it's still going on. Similarly, in Illinois, the Democratic incumbent challenged Paul Stout's petitions and managed to tie up the court hearing until after the ballots had been printed without Paul's name on them. Rat bastards. Despite these actions, both Gary and Walter in New York and Paul in Illinois continued to distribute literature, although their constituents were denied the right to vote libertarian. They did get to hear some libertarian ideas. No data is available on the efforts waged by Manny Klausner in California, Pasquale Giordano in Georgia, and David Aden in Washington. From what we have heard, none of them have received more than a handful of votes, and only Aden was on the ballot. But all of them did a great job in disseminating libertarian ideas. So now we're going to go to Idaho there with Sims. Sims is sometimes counted as a libertarian win. We didn't have party status in Idaho. If you count him as a libertarian win, then we, in the very first year, had a Congress seat. And he had to run as a Republican, but I think there is good justification to count him as the first libertarian elected, and not count our first congressperson as just an Amash. And he wasn't elected as a libertarian, he converted. But let me tell you the rest here. Steve Sims, a libertarian running for Congress as a Republican in the 1st District of Idaho, pulled off an unexpected miracle and won. Steve, an unabashed libertarian, didn't even expect to make it past the primary, but won an upset victory in a 3-way race, and then went on to win by a handy margin, about 55 to 45% in the general election. Ralph Smead, the man who was behind Steve's entry into the race, attended the LP XCOM meeting in Albuquerque and said that Steve appreciated the endorsement the LP had given him and hoped to cooperate with us in the future. Ralph also showed films of Steve's TV spots, which were a refreshing change from the usual BS. In one, Steve urged citizens to take a bite out of government. In another, he asked why U.S. citizens are not allowed to own gold. And yet in another, he pointed out the dangers of gun control laws and urged their repeal. And in practically every spot, he stated that the issue is freedom and called for less government. Steve took many stands directly from the LP national platform and used an adaptation of our arrow and Tanstaffel emblem on much of his literature. We congratulate Steve on his victory and look forward to seeing a congressman stand up for liberty in the House of Reprehensibles. Yeah, oh God, I love David. We congratulate Steve on his victory and look forward to seeing a congressman. Oh no, I already said that. Excuse me, I just got so distracted with the House of Reprehensibles. A note of interest in the Sims race. Idaho is probably the most libertarian state in the country, and thus is probably the only state where a libertarian could capture a GOP nomination. Idaho gave John Schmitz 9% of its presidential vote, the highest percentage he drew in any state. And I think it'd be interesting if I can do some more research on Steve Sims to do an episode just on him. I think that's a forgotten part of our history, that I do think we can claim our first congressman in 1972. All right, important notice at the bottom there. In accordance with the decision reached by the National Executive Committee in Albuquerque, the LP newsletter will be published on a bi-monthly rather than monthly schedule during 1973. That'll make it easier for me to keep up and have more expansive bonus episodes. LP members who are receiving the newsletter as part of their membership will receive issues until the expiration of their current membership. Those who subscribe as non-members will have their subscriptions extended so that they will receive their full 12 issues. New subs will receive only 6 issues for their $2. The LP newsletter is published by the National Office of the Libertarian Party. Items of interest to LP members are welcome. David F. Nolan, editor. Base circulation of this issue, 931 copies. And we have one of those 931 copies here. All right. I want to see what's left here. What I think we are going to do at this point is I want to save some of these for their own episodes. I don't want these to be too long. So what I'd like to do is just go over the back page. And what we will have some bonuses on is, as always, the political perspective. But also, there's some, because this was a double issue, we have what, like the summary of the year 1. I think that would be nice to go over separately. And also, this, I guess, is what's passing for the minutes of the first executive committee meeting. And I think that would be interesting to take on its own as well. So let's just go over that back page, and then we will be done for this evening, unless anyone has any comments. I mean, hate me if you want, but I don't like that drawing of John Hospers and Tony Nathan there. That's a very unattractive drawing of Tony Nathan. She looks like a man in that picture, and she was very feminine. Like, I don't like that picture at all. The one of John Hospers isn't so bad. And they didn't get her little boof, you know, the beehive at all. No, not a good picture. All right, so thanks. Although it would be impossible to thank the many, many individuals, organizations, and publications that went above and beyond the call of duty in helping the LP during the 72 campaign, we would like to take a few paragraphs to cite a few of those who did the most. Undoubtedly, we will miss some of those who deserve special commendation, and for this we apologize. And of course, it goes without saying that each and every LP state chairman deserves special thanks of all libertarians everywhere. To turn to the specifics, however, it should be obvious that the very deepest thanks should go to our presidential and vice presidential candidates, Dr. John Hospers and Mrs. Tony Nathan. They had the courage to accept the nominations of a previously unheard of party, thus subjecting themselves to scorn and abuse on the part of many people, and incurring an obligation to spend literally thousands of hours of their own time on a venture that offered them no immediate personal gain. There will be others who will take up the banner they carried in the future years, but they were the first, and for this they deserve our special and undying appreciation. Second only to the thanks owed John and Tony are those owed to Bill Sussel and Ed Crane, who served as the campaign managers for these two candidates, spending great amounts of their own time and money in the process. Special thanks are also owed to the various people who performed services for the LP and its candidates. Among these, Dr. Marvin Edwards in Oklahoma, Georgianne Trammell in Texas, Andrew and Priscilla Ketchen, and Ken and Cynthia Napton in New Hampshire, and Winston Duke in Illinois, all of whom were responsible for providing facilities, raising funds, and arranging publicity for John and Tony while they were on tour in these respective states. Now, the New Hampshire people mentioned here, Daryl Perry had asked me if we still had the delegate list from 1972, and unfortunately, so far, we don't, because he was curious if there were any New Hampshire delegates. So I am wondering if Ken and Cynthia Napton from New Hampshire mentioned here were delegates. If anyone was, it seems likely they would have been. Two other individuals who deserve special mention are Jim Davidson in Washington, D.C., who sent out a mailing to 7,000 libertarians at his own expense, and Taya Bowles in Colorado, who oversaw the operation of the campaign fund, a task which included sending over 150 thank you letters, and I'm sure they were all handwritten. And finally, thanks are owed to the New Right Coalition, which was the only organization, to our knowledge, that officially endorsed the LP ticket. Bits and pieces. Information on SIL, which is the Society for Individual Liberty, and Reason enclosed, which we don't have any of these enclosures, which is a shame. Enclosed with this newsletter, you will find material describing the Society for Individual Liberty and Reason magazine. We urge you to study this carefully and to join SIL and subscribe to Reason. And it gives some statistical information. Here's another enclosure we don't have. Green sheet addenda. Enclosed, you will also find a new green sheet listing LP officers and state chairmen. And alas, it's already out of date. Alaska's LP address is now Box 726, College, Alaska. And the temporary state chairman in Arizona is now Freeman Fox. That's a badass name. 2930 East Osborne Road, Phoenix, Arizona. Treasury Department compiling gun owner list. We have been informed that the Treasury Department has ordered all gun shops to report the names of everyone bringing in guns for repairs. So, if you have a gun you don't want Uncle Sam to know about, ... basically repair it yourself or do it on the black market. Silver sales agents wanted. Utah LP Chairman Carl Bray is setting up a nationwide organization of libertarian silver and gold sales agents. If you're interested, contact Carl. And Powell Memorandum on Free Enterprise. Of possible interest to LP members is the memorandum drafted by Lewis F. Powell, now a Supreme Court Justice. Maybe I can find this. For the National Chamber of Commerce, entitled The Attack on the American Free Enterprise System. It outlines some of the problems we face and suggests some solutions. This memo might be a door opener for local LPs to get invitations to speak to local chambers of Congress. I'm going to have to look for that. So that is all we are going to do this time. And we'll cover the rest maybe in one bonus, but maybe several if I uncover some more information from the data we got here. So let me, here's my little thing. I want to go back to full screen. So again, thank you so much, everyone. I truly appreciate the time and attention you give me. I hope that these lessons in LP history are interesting to you, either for its own sake or to help you in your activism. And again, if you can support me, it would really touch me and mean a great deal to me. So you could go to patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. I do upload some patron-only content there, so you do get a little something extra as well. All right, everyone, I hope you have an awesome night. And also, check out a video I did on a really bad conservative take on the Breonna Taylor situation. It's just gross, so I had to do a rebuttal. Check it out.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want